Hey there, seventh grade science students. This is Mrs. Barnett here. I am going to take you through the instructions for the first, actually second, because y'all did Drops on a Penny last week. I hope that you enjoyed that. But a lab that we're going to go through called Can You Taste the Rainbow? So the first thing that I actually need you to do is for everyone to open their Chromebook and to let me see if I can get this out there. Okay, to open your Chromebook and open the assignment that says, Can you taste the rainbow? It's a Google Doc assignment that I've assigned to you, and this is what it looks like. So this is going to be the outline that you're going to be using to complete this lab. And I've gone through and I've created the outline for you, and I'm going to walk you through how we're going to make some observations and some questions and a hypothesis, identify the variables, and then I'm going to explain to you the procedure for how we're going to collect this data. Okay, so this is the handout that you have. So this is what you need to open up. And I'm just going to tell Ms. Knuckles that at any point you can pause this recording and give students time to access or type what I'm asking them to type. Go back and rewatch for those concurrent learners who are at home, completing this at home. So this is just a way just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, so at this point, you have completed your scientific inquiry packet and you've gone through and looked at like what's a testable question, how to formulate a hypothesis. Hypotheses is going to be plural. And now what we're going to do this week is do a couple of labs in class where we are practicing all of those different scientific inquiry steps to kind of put them into practice and what this looks like in a real world experiment scenario. So the first experiment we're going to do is called Can You Taste the Rainbow? So in any experiment, the first thing you need is an observation. So here you can see that I have listed kind of the general steps of the scientific inquiry, and we're going to be following those. So I'm actually going to pull up my answer key that I'm going to be using to instruct you, and you'll be typing in some things for there. So for observation, what I want y'all to notice is that Miss Knuckles has given y'all a packet of Skittles. Okay, and so we can make some observations about these Skittles, and I could ask you, if I was live right now, what are some things that you observe about the Skittles? And you might say, well, they're different colors. There's 5 colors, which would be a qualitative and a quantitative observation. But the biggest thing is that they claim to be flavored. Okay, so if you look here on the back, it goes through and it talks about the different color Skittles and what their flavor claims to be. So there's 5 different colors and they claim to be different flavors. Okay, so for the observation that we are going to use for this lab, and this is what I want everyone to type, is Skittles are different flavors. So we could have lots of observations, but this is the one that we're going to use to guide our experiment today. So everyone should type on your Google Doc, Skittles are different flavors. Okay, so that's going to be your observation. So at this point, Miss Knuckles could pause it and give you a moment, but I'm going to continue on. There are 5 flavors. So purple claims to be grape, yellow claims to be a lemon flavor, green is lime, orange is orange, and red is strawberry. Okay, so this is the observation that we're using to guide our experiment. Now, the next step is going to be developing a question. So we want it to be simple enough, but specific enough that we could actually run an experiment, collect data. So I'm going to guide you in this. We could have a discussion on what are some, questions that we could pose, but this is the question we're going to be looking at. Can students correctly identify the color or the flavor of the Skittles by their taste alone? Okay, so remember, in any good observation or an experiment, you want to use your 5 senses. We're actually going to be eliminating the go-to sense that you tend to use to observe your environment, and that's your sense of sight. So you're going to be taking away your sense of sight and trying to see if you can identify the color or the flavor of the Skittles by taste alone. Okay, so you are going to be pseudo blindfolded. We're not going to literally put a blindfold on you, but you'll just be shutting your eyes when we do our little taste test. So this is the question. So we can pause and type our question. Can students correctly identify the color or the flavor, because the color does indicate a flavor, of Skittles by taste alone? Next is the hypothesis. So before you formulate a hypothesis, having some background information, background research, has this been done before? And to expedite our time, this has been done before. And your background is information is going to be making some observations where you are actually going to now open your Skittle packet and you're going to try each of the colors independently. So you're going to take your red Skittle, whichever one you want to start. This is at your desk. You do not have to have your eyes closed for this because this is just your observations, okay, before you're going to formulate your hypothesis. So you're going to see if you can tell a difference between these Skittles and their flavors. And so what I want you to do is one at a time, you're going to put the Skittle in your mouth, and it's important that you let it sit on your tongue for about 5 seconds before you chew. Why? Well, notice that the outside is different colors, and we could get into color dyes or artificial flavoring, but that the flavor of the Skittle, is going to be on the outside, but also the inside. So we want to sort of let the outside, that crunchy part, sort of melt before we start chewing it. So you'll put it in your mouth. I'm just going to demonstrate. I'm trying to make some observations. This is red. It's supposed to be strawberry. Okay. It has a very distinct flavor. Maybe I write some notes or type some things, but I take my time. I chew it, I swallow it, and I'm going to go through each of my 5 colors and see if I can tell a difference, because that's going to help you formulate your hypothesis. So pause the video, and I would like everyone to do their trials, not your trials, but your just your initial observations. So please pause. Okay, now that you've made your observations and you have a good indication, can you tell the difference? Did you distinctly tell a difference between, say, the red, which I'm still chewing, which is supposed to be strawberry, and the yellow, which is supposed to be lemon? Okay, and so you kind of have to gauge that. And you're going to use these to make your hypothesis. So one thing I want to tell you is that in our hypothesis, we have to have something measurable so that we can compare our data to our hypothesis. So I'm going to ask that all of you include a prediction of a percent of the class that will correctly or incorrectly guess the flavor. You could do it in a positive, that 50% of the class will correctly guess the flavors, or 75% will incorrectly guess the flavors. It doesn't matter. So everybody's hypothesis is going to start with, if our class blindly taste tests 5 Skittle colors, then everybody go to your Google Doc here, and you're going to start typing that statement by your hypothesis. If our class blindly taste tests 5 Skittle colors, then you are going to finish the statement, okay, based on your observations and your data. There could be literally every single student in your class could have a different then statement, and that's totally okay. Hypotheses are not right or wrong. They're proven, or they're supported or not supported. It's important to understand the difference. So you're not trying to be right or wrong. You're trying to get your data to support you or not support you. So what percentage do you think will be correct or incorrect? So literally there's lots of ways. And maybe at this point, Ms. Knuckles wants to pause and ask some of you to share your hypothesis. I would say, for example, if our class blindly taste tests 5 Skittle colors, then 40% will correctly guess. Okay, that's my hypothesis. You may have a different one. The next step is identifying our variables. So I know you've worked really hard identifying the independent, dependent, and control variables in an experiment. Okay, so under your variable section, our independent, what we're manipulating on purpose is our Skittle flavors. So that's your independent. Our dependent is what we're measuring. We're measuring the percent of correct or incorrect guesses. You can really measure it either way because you're actually going to be measuring both. What needs to stay the same in this experiment? Well, first, all students need to be given the same 5 flavors. They need to be blindfolded with their eyes closed. They need to follow the same tasting procedure, which is going to be putting it on your tongue for 5 seconds and then chewing. And this all needs to be done in the same class, at the same time of day, et cetera. You might think of some other controls that you could add. Those are the ones that sort of came to my mind in the beginning. Okay, so you want to take a moment and identify your variables. And finally, a basic procedure we're going to follow is you're going to, number 1, taste the different flavors of Skittles, make your observations, which you've already done. And number 2, at this point, you're going to get in a group of 2, okay, or a group of 3 if there's an odd number, to complete your blindfolded taste test. Collect the data, share with your class. So this is how we're going to do this. Now, and you can pause at this point to do your procedure. In your data section here, I already have 1, 2, 3 data tables you're going to be filling out. Okay, for your blindfolded taste test, you're only filling out the My Data section. So the My Data section, so you're in a group of 1 or 2 because you're going to help each other because you're obviously going to have your eyes closed. Okay, and so you'll take turns as a partner. So you're going to have, you have your 5 colored Skittles. Oh my gosh, they're falling all over the floor. Okay, you're going to have your 5 colors of Skittles just kind of out, in any random order. And you're going to shut your eyes at this point. This is why you have to have a partner. So you're going to pick up a random Skittle. Your partner will see what color it is. You will not know what color it is. So I'm going to open my eyes now just so I can explain to you. So I picked the yellow one. You don't know that, but your partner sees that. So you're going to take the yellow one, you're going to put it in your mouth, you're going to chew, and you're going to guess the color. And say you say yellow. So at that point, your partner's filling this out for you, and they're going to say next to the yellow one, correct. Okay. Say you picked yellow, but you said orange. Then your partner is going to write incorrect. And then in parentheses, they're going to write orange because it's important to know what color you picked because that's interesting too, because we may have a lot of students that mistake the yellow for orange. Okay. And then you do that one, then you pick up another one, put it in your mouth. And so this one was green. So your partner's going to go to the green column. And if you say green, then they're going to type correct, or maybe they're going to type incorrect, purple. Once you've done all 5, at that point, you open your eyes, you see your data. Oh my gosh, I got them all right, or I got them all wrong, or whatever. Switch roles. The other person is going to do their 5, close their eyes, and you're going to type their data for them. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So you're going to have your data, whether you correctly or incorrectly guessed each of those 5 colors. Make sure each partner gets their turn. Now, at this point, we're going to share our class data. Okay, so this is going to take some collaboration. So what Miss Knuckles should do is either pull this up on her DocCam or put this data table on the dry erase board so that we can have a student be doing tally marks, okay? And so you're going to be looking at your data, okay? And everyone's going to look at the purple first, and Miss Knuckles or whoever is going to say, okay, raise your hand if you guessed purple correctly. And if you had purple correct, you're going to raise your hand, and we're going to count how many students correctly guessed purple. Maybe, if there's 20 students in your class, maybe 15 correctly guessed. And then you could ask, okay, when they were taste testing purple, did not guess it correctly? Then you would raise your hand if that was you. And obviously those 2 numbers should add up to the total number of students in the class. So you have to be aware of what your data was, raise your hand for your appropriate category, and then we can take the information for the whole class. So you're going to have, if you have a total of say 20 kids in your class, then each of these columns, for example, should add up to 20. So say 15, and then 5, 13, and then 7. Those 2 numbers should always add up to 20 because you only have 20 students, were the ones that participated. All right. We're doing good. Pause when you need to, rewind when you need to. Now we're going to convert our data to a percent. So we have to do some math. Okay. So for each of these Skittle category, you need to figure it out as a percent because remember our hypothesis was written as a percent. So you need to take the total number of correct guesses for each color and divide it by the total number of students in your class. So for example, if 10 students correctly guess yellow and you have 20 students in your class, then 10 divided by 20 is 50%. The way that I did that is literally if you put it in a calculator, 10 divided by 20, it's going to give you 0.50. And if you know percents, then you could just move your decimal over to the right or just multiply by 100 and that will give you 50. You're going to do this for all the colors, and you are going to just figure out the difference between the percent correct and incorrect. So if we look at purple and we go back to our class data and say 10, we have a total of 20 students and 10 correctly guessed and 10 incorrectly guessed, then we would know that our percent, because of that, is 50% correct, 50% correct. Yellow, maybe it was 7 out of 10, 7 out of 20 correctly guessed. Oh, let me get my phone, my calculator. So say 7 out of 20 correctly guessed. So in my calculator here, if I would put 7 divided by 20, that's 0.35. That's 35%. Now I'm just going to use math. What's 100 minus 35? That means that 65% should have incorrectly guessed. Okay. Same kind of concept is that these two columns should add it to 100. You can't have more than 100%. So you are converting your data to a percent. So if you need to rewatch it, pause it, talk about it, rewrite, and just convert it all to a percent. Once you have a percent, then you're going to graph your data. So whenever you do an experiment, you have your data in numbers, in data tables, but you're always going to graphically represent those numbers. It's just an easier visual to sort of see what your data is representing. Graphs are a lot easier to read than numbers. And so you're going to follow the basic graphing format for a bar graph. I'm going to pause for a second and create something for you. I'll be right back. You won't know the pause though. Hold on. Okay, so we're going to be making a basic bar graph, and you'll be following the following instructions. So your Skittle colors is your independent variable. This goes on your x-axis. Remember the acronym dry mix, dependent responding on the y, manipulated independent on the x. And the percent of students of correct and incorrect will go on the y. So you're going to have 3 sets of bars, 2 each. 1 bar for percent correct, 1 bar for percent incorrect for each color, for a total of 6 bars. So I've kind of done, this might look backwards. Oh, no, yay. Okay. So it's going to look something like this, where your x-axis, you're going to have your 5 Skittle colors, and your y-axis, you figure out the interval. I went up by tens. I just did this really quickly, percent of students. So 10 to, and I just made each of my lines or my grids worth 10%. I go to my data and say purple was 50% correct, 50% incorrect. And you can see I have 2 bars, and I'm color coding, and I have a key. So I'm going to have 2 colors, and I'm going to choose whatever. And my yellow is always going to indicate the percent correct, and my green will be percent incorrect. Then I would do the same for yellow. So say yellow, I had 70 and 30. So my first bar would go up to 70%. My second bar would go up to 30. And then I would color code yellow and green. And I would do that for each of my colors. So it's going to look something like this. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Do that on a sheet of graph paper. Hopefully you have a sheet of graph paper that already has the grid lines. That just makes it a really clean graph. If not, maybe Ms. Knuckles can help you with getting a sheet of graph paper, but that's going to take some time. So you will, once you do your experiment, maybe she'll replay this and, pause it at different points, but that's what you're going to do for the graph. In the conclusion, to properly write a conclusion, I wanted to sort of the first time give you a model to follow, where literally you are going to type word for word what I have written for you and insert your data where applicable. So I want to guide you through the process of writing a thorough conclusion. You use this to write your conclusion for Can You Taste the Rainbow? Write this or type it word for word, inserting your data where indicated. So here on your handout where you have the conclusion section, this is where you will type it. Okay, the conclusion section. And I am going to be attaching these instructions on the assignment as well. Or I actually might just give it to Miss Knuckles so that it's not, so it's in the video and you can pause it and look at it in the video. I'll figure out a way, but somehow these instructions will be posted for you so that you can see this. So a good conclusion is going to be 2 separate paragraphs, and it needs to be written in paragraph form. You will get points taken off if it's not. You always start with looking at the data. And you're not going to say my hypothesis was right or wrong. That is the wrong terminology. It's the data supported or did not support your hypothesis. Because so many students get into this, I want to make sure I formulate my hypothesis so it's always right. And in actuality, in real science, most scientists are trying to get the data to not support the hypothesis, actually. So they're trying really hard. You actually can learn more in a lot of ways through that than getting the data to support it. So Did your data support or not support your hypothesis? That's going to be your first statement. So you're going to look at your hypothesis. Okay. And your hypothesis was about the overall class. You're going to look at your class data. So, you're going to look at all of, the different colors, and you're going to determine, which colors were supported, which colors were not supported. And you're going to kind of just type that. So if you said that 50% would correctly guess, then guess what? The data did support your hypothesis for purple, but it didn't for yellow. You would kind of discuss that. And then you're simply going to restate your hypothesis. My hypothesis was, and go back to what you said and just restate it. And then my data was that you're going to talk about you personally. You accurately guessed the flavor of 2 out of 5 of your Skittles, or 5 out of 5, or you didn't guess any of them correctly. You're just going to insert that. And then what about your class data? So for our whole class, then this is where you would discuss the second data table. 50% correctly guessed purple, 35% correctly guessed yellow. You just kind of restate the data. The second paragraph is a little more reflective. So next time, I want you to think about taking this particular experiment and what could you do to do something different in this experiment? How could have this been made better? Like next time it's something as simple as have water to drink in between each trial to sort of cleanse our palate. Okay, something like that. Just think about a way you could tweak the experiment. It's always important to talk about possible sources of error because we're humans and it happens. So even if it did not happen, it's just good for you to think about what could have gone wrong that would skew your data. So possible sources of human error might be, so here you're going to insert any possible human errors that could have happened that would have affected your results. We did incorrect math. A student did not properly blindfold and they peeked. Don't do that. Think about like all the things that could have happened. And then finally, we're not finally yet. Hold on. Okay. I think it'd be a good idea to further experiment by. So give an idea of how you could alter this experiment or a new topic that it sparked in you. Be thoughtful. This is where you're really like, I want to look at more about human taste buds and artificial food coloring, and food dyes and things like that, and what gives flavor. I mean, you could really just say anything here, but this really should just show that you're thinking about this topic, and you're like, ooh, next time I would want to do this with like Starburst, or just really think outside the box here. And then finally, you should say, I learned. And this should be your final statement, something that you learned while conducting this experiment. So I'm guiding you through that conclusion process. It's 2 paragraphs. You're taking my model, you are implementing it pretty much word for word and inserting the data for your experiment in your class where applicable. Okay, so at the end, your Google Doc will be filled out all except for your graph. And what you could actually do to make it easier on Miss Knuckles is once you have completed your graph, is take a picture of it with your Chromebook and insert the picture of your graph into this Google Doc so that she has one document to look at and to grade. That would actually be fantabulous for her, I'm sure. And then you're going to turn in this Google Doc and then everything is there. Okay, so I hope that you have enjoyed this experiment. What do you do with your leftover Skittles? They're for your eating pleasure if you'd like. And I hope that you saw this process sort of in action. We are going to do another little experiment this week. I'm going to do a separate video for that. And then I'm going to introduce you later this week to Gizmos, an online simulation where you're going to run your first experiment for your sort of end of the unit test grade. You're not actually having a test. You're actually going to be running an experiment through using the Gizmo. So I hope that this finds you well, and I hope you had fun. Thanks. Bye.